A. Smith Show starts right now.
Human beings in a mob. What's a mob to a king? What's a king to a god?
Cut the music, Nuno. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the latest edition of the Stephen A. Smith Show, coming at you as I love to do every weekday afternoon, 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right over the airwaves of Sirius XM Mad Dog Sports Radio. The number to call up, as always, is 888 Mad Dog 6. That's 888-623-3646. There's a lot of sports items to get into today, and I promise you I will do just that. I'm going to talk about Danny Ferry and Mike Budenholzer in Atlanta with the Hawks. I'm going to talk about LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers moving forward. I might even get into a little football because of something I had to say about Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. And, of course, Des Bryant making noise about, impending not free agency for him, but a contract dispute that, he's holding on to, and how that may end up resonating in the days and the weeks to come. All of those things will be discussed on this show today. I will not spend a whole bunch of time waxing eloquently, or not, in some people's eyes anyway, about the shooting in South Carolina, but forgive me if I feel the need to do so. I sit before you today doing this show pretty much the same way I felt when that shooting in Newtown, Connecticut took place more than a year ago. Another tragic shooting. In this particular instance, it was at the historic Emanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in South Carolina. A gunman, allegedly 21 years of age, allegedly and reportedly white, decided to go into a church, sit around for an hour, and then proceeds to murder 9 African Americans simply because they were black. He has been caught. They are trying to extradite him back to South Carolina because he was caught in North Carolina. He gave himself up with little to no resistance, according to the reports. And we will go from there. My heart's broken. Lives lost, lives taken from us. And forgive me if it especially resonates, because not that no life means less than the other. No matter how heartbroken I feel at this particular moment in time, no matter how much it resonates with me because the 9 people killed were African American, I can assure you nothing will ever eclipse the level of despair that I felt when those children in Newtown were murdered. I cried then. I cried this morning. My heart is broken right now, and I'm incredibly sad. Senseless violence is obviously something that this world is incredibly familiar with, particularly with the times that we're living in. The president spoke about the senselessness of it this morning, or just a few minutes ago, actually, this afternoon. It was the 14th time in the presidency of Barack Obama that he has had to hold a press conference to address a fatal shooting. Newtown, Tucson political rally, a movie theater in Aurora, a Virginia college campus. Those are just a few of the sites of mass killings that have taken place under his presidency. Draw whatever correlation you want, but then make no mistake about it. We got a problem. We got a problem. And on this particular day, at this particular moment, I think it resonates. And it illuminates the fact that we still have a race issue in this country. Now, for those of you who don't happen to be black, let me be clear in what I'm about to say. I think a vast majority of people in this country, in this great nation of ours, are God-fearing individuals that don't want to do harm to anybody. And since this country is made up of 66% white, hey, guess what? That means the vast majority of white folks are those God-fearing people that I'm talking about, that don't mean any harm to anybody. So for black folks out there who will be tempted to sit there and talk about white folks in generalities, let me tell you right now to pump the brakes. That's not the attitude to have. That's not the attitude you should have, because that's factually incorrect in our day and time in this nation that we're living in. We have a black president in a country where approximately 33 million people are black and 69 million people voted for this man. So let's not go there. And let's not use this as a reason to characterize or stain all people who don't happen to be black or who don't happen to be minority. That's not what our country is made of, particularly at this moment in time. But having said that, it's important to recognize that it's still an issue and that it's still a problem, and that a shooting, as tragic and as fatal as it may be, isn't the only indication we need in order for us to stand up and recognize we still have problems. When folks talk about being hated because they're black or being hated because they're any kind of minority, that's not people just crying into the wind. Those are real issues that still permeate our society. It's not fabricated. It's not made up. It's not a figment of anyone's imagination. It's very, very real. And a shooting in Charleston, South Carolina, while incredibly tragic, heart-wrenching, heartbreaking, and beyond, it's not, nor should it be, the perfect indication that as a nation, we still have problems that have gone relatively unaddressed. Just the other day, we played some sound right here on this radio show. Jonathan Nuno, my producer extraordinaires. We played some sound of LeBron James walking into the tunnel after a game in Golden State where a woman yelled something to LeBron James that isn't fit to be repeated over these airwaves, to the point where security had to sit there and tell her to watch her mouth. Just the other day, I'm in Cleveland, Ohio, and some dude sitting near his daughter throws up his middle finger at me and starts spewing stuff that I'm not going to repeat over these airwaves. LeBron's not the only one. I'm not the only one. Athletes, professionals, regular modern day citizens, we're not alone. You have folks walking around in our society, albeit the very few. It's important to say that, the very few. But they screech the loudest because of the things they say, because of what they want to spew, and unfortunately, with proof like incidences that just took place in Charleston, South Carolina last night, with what they're willing to do to illuminate their level of hatred and their disregard for human beings, and dare we say human life. At some point in time, in order for us to truly address it with the fervor it deserves, we have to stand up and be willing to recognize that it is a problem that exists, and it is a problem that we have to deal with. And you know there is something beyond sacrilegious when you are willing to walk into a church literally with people praying and decide you are going to take their life. And according to the reports, actually let someone go just so they could leave to tell people what he did. I wish I had words to express my feelings accurately. Although I'm somebody who's a paid and licensed communicator, I just don't know if I have it in me right now. It hurts so much to see stuff like this. You vacillate back and forth between anger, disbelief, resignation, and fear. Literally going minutes at a time, wanting retaliation to wanting to run away. Our president, Barack Obama, spoke approximately an hour ago, and he had a few things to say. Listen to our president. Take it away, Nuno.
There's something particularly heartbreaking about a death happening in a place in which we seek solace and we seek peace, in a place of worship. Mother Emanuel is, in fact, more than a church. This is a place of worship that was founded by African Americans seeking liberty. This is a church that was burned to the ground because its worshipers worked to end slavery. When there were laws banning all black church gatherings, they conducted services in secret. When there was a nonviolent movement to bring our country closer in line with our highest ideals, some of our brightest leaders spoke and led marches from this church's steps. This is a sacred place in the history of Charleston and in the history of America. Until the investigation is complete, I'm necessarily constrained in terms of talking about the details of the case. But I don't need to be constrained about the emotions that tragedies like this raise. I've had to make statements like this too many times. Communities like this have had to endure tragedies like this too many times. We don't have all the facts, but we do know that, once again, innocent people were killed in part because someone who wanted to inflict harm had no trouble getting their hands on a gun. Now is the time for mourning and for healing. But let's be clear. At some point, we as a country will have to reckon with the fact that this type of mass violence does not happen in other advanced countries. It doesn't happen in other places with this kind of frequency. And it is in our power to do something about it. I say that recognizing the politics in this town foreclose a lot of those avenues right now. But it'd be wrong for us not to acknowledge it. At some point, it's going to be important for the American people to come to grips with it and for us to be able to shift how we think about the issue of gun violence collectively. The fact that this took place in a black church obviously also raises questions about a dark part of our history. This is not the first time that black churches have been attacked. And we know that hatred across races and faiths pose a particular threat to our democracy and our ideals. The good news is I am confident that the outpouring of unity and strength and fellowship and love across Charleston today, from all races, from all faiths, from all places of worship, indicates the degree to which those old vestiges of hatred can be overcome.
For those of you who aren't aware, the suspect in question, his name is Dylan Roof. He was taken into custody approximately 11:15 a.m. this morning. They caught him in Shelby, North Carolina, 245 miles away from where the killing took place, at the Emanuel A.M.E. Church in Charleston, South Carolina. I wish that did a lot for so many of us who are heartbroken over this incident. I suspect it won't, however. 9 people are dead after all, simply because they were black. This is the Stephen A. Smith Show, Sirius XM Mad Dog Sports Radio. 888 Mad Dog 6 is always the number to call up. That's 888-623-3646. I'll transition to a couple of sports items, particularly something that happened with the Atlanta Hawks. Unfortunately, another incident involving race as far as I'm concerned. And in this particular instance, it's incredibly unfortunate because I think a white individual is getting a very, very bad rap. 888 Mad Dog 6 is the number to call. That's 888-623-3646. Getting back to the shootings in South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina last night. Rough transition, but I just made it. Can I say this? Because this point entered my mind because a dear friend of mine just brought it to my attention, reminded me about something. This man, Mr. Roof, Dylan Roof, 21-year-old, white individual, allegedly, supposedly having murdered 9 black people simply due to their race inside of a church in South Carolina last night. Forgive me for asking this question. How was he captured alive? I'm just wondering. You killed 9 people and flee, and you're still living. Michael Brown dead. Gentleman in Staten Island, dead. Trayvon Martin, dead. Even though that was a community watchman. But this man is found alive. I mean, allowed to surrender, gave little resistance according to them. But you do understand, I don't know whether this is right or wrong, but I am articulating this for people out there everywhere, not just folks inside the minority community, but for those of you outside the minority community, black or Latino, you need to understand something. In the eyes of a lot of black folks, people are tired of racism and entitlement being defined as mental illness and things of that nature. Black folks are called thugs. Muslims are called terrorists. But in a lot of our eyes, from time to time, when blacks get killed, the assailants are defined as mentally ill. To a lot of us, that's soft-pedaling an issue. I'm not qualified to say definitively that that's right or wrong. I'm giving you how people feel. Other folks get harmed or killed. It's by thugs, it's by terrorists. Black folks die. And folks are labeled mentally ill. Do you know why that difference matters to black people? It matters to black people because when you're watching TV or you hear about law cases, you know how somebody is charged with first degree or second degree murder and they plead not guilty due to reasons of insanity or mental illness? In other words, if you're found not guilty or guilty by means of a mental illness of insanity or whatever the case may be, the penalty It's perceived as not being harsh. It's almost like it's downgraded. And it's stuff like that that forces a lot of black folks to ask the question or to protest that Black Lives Matter. Just something to think about. Nobody's pretending to know the answers, but the questions need to be asked. Oftentimes when I'm forced to address an issue that makes folks uncomfortable, I don't want to be definitive because I don't know if I have a right to be definitive because I don't have the facts. But I do see how something looks. And as the president said less than 2 hours ago, just because we have to wait to definitively state what transpired doesn't mean that I don't get to express how I feel. I'm paraphrasing him, of course. Just something to think about. Robert in New Orleans, you're live with Stephen A. on Mad Dog. What's up?
Good afternoon, sir. I just want to start off by saying I agree with you as far as not being shocked or surprised about South Carolina. However, I am surprised that it happened in a church the way.
Yes, I am.
He sat down for an hour and did that. That was really
cold-blooded.
Evil.
Cold-blooded.
Cold-blooded. Yeah, I am shocked by that, but we just have to move on, and we have to, as a country. And my second...
In Missouri, you're live with Stephen A. on Mad Dog. Damon, talk to me.
How you doing, Stephen A.? Hey, Stephen A., my condolences to the family in South Carolina. But I want to ask you a question, Stephen A. I don't know if you can answer it or not. But why are we so hated? Why are we so hated and feared? Why?
Well, first of all, I don't, I think times have improved. And I think that it's the obvious answer from an historical perspective. We look at the nation that we came to, how we came over here, how we were viewed. We were viewed as 3/5 of a man, for crying out loud. We weren't even deemed a full-fledged human being. We were comparable. We were labeled comparable to animals. You just had all of those problems. And it's a lot to overcome when you're looked down upon, when you're labeled in an inflammatory fashion, and people are being raised in this world to believe you to be inferior, etc. It stems from that. It emanates from that. But we've made incredible advancements as a nation where things have gotten better. And now I think you're asking me, I'm giving you my honest feeling with no definitive statistical proof to back this up or anything. I'm just answering your question, sir. I'm of the belief also that because of how we've prospered, how things have gotten significantly better compared to what it was at a different time, particularly during the civil rights movement. I think that what we get sometimes, and it's not from most, it's not from all, it's from a select few, but nevertheless, they screech the loudest. I think what we get from folks from other communities is a level of frustration and, dare I say, disgust because of what is perceived to be a lack of appreciation for the progress we have made. I think you see people looking at black folks sometimes and saying, don't you have enough? Aren't you finally satisfied? When is enough going to be enough? I do believe there are people who have that kind of mentality. And I think that especially once a black president became president of the United States in this nation, you had a lot of folks who voted for him outside of the black community because they obviously they must have agreed with his policies to some degree, but there was also an ingrained belief that indeed it would be indicative that we are living in better times and we've progressed tremendously and we've come very far. And so when you have that in existence and you still have folks complaining about things that are transpiring, I don't think people question whether it's legitimate or not. They literally say sometimes, Why are they complaining?
Right.
And we know it's not right, but we also know that some people feel that way. Now, that doesn't necessarily make it as simple as racism, because there are times, listen, my parents are black. There are times that my mother and my father are disgusted at what we see transpiring within our own community. So I find myself asking, if they're disgusted with it, and my older sisters are disgusted with it, and my aunts and uncles who are in their 70s and 80s are disgusted with it, how can I expect folks outside the black community to feel differently when folks within our own community are disgusted by some of the things some of us are doing? It's hard, but it's a discussable issue. It's something that warrants dialogue, and certainly doesn't excuse violence being enacted against anybody. But it is our reality in this world that we're living in.
One more comment, if I could.
Go ahead. I hope I answered your question, though. But go ahead.
Hi, Stephen. First of all, my condolences, my sympathies to the families. I can't even imagine the pain. And as someone of the Jewish faith, I can tell you, my family, we marched in Selma alongside of you. We marched to Washington. We feel your pain. We feel your anguish. And the disgraceful thing is we live in a world where my grandchildren, they go to Hebrew school. They have to have guards, armed guards in the Hebrew schools. They have to have, the synagogues are attacked all over the world, despite the wonderful speech that our president made. There's sickness all over the world, and I don't know where it stops, Stephen. I think that, we have stood along each other as minorities in this country for years. We've made great strides, but there's still. I just hope this isn't a conspiracy. I hope it's just one wacko, that.
I hope it is. I hope it is too, Bob. But I think it's important, especially when you brought it up with your children, your grandchildren, going to Hebrew school, and obviously having to have armed security guards and what have you. I think that we all have to come together, and I think that we have to understand that there are differences, but it's okay to have differences as long as our agenda is one and the same, and that's to be at peace with one another and feel
absolutely
free to live our lives. We've got to do that, Bob. We just have to.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Stephen. And
Thank you so much, Bob. Appreciate it. Ed in Grand Rapids. I'm sorry. You're live with Stephen A. on Mad Dog Sports Radio. Ed, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Stephen, and I appreciate the time. Real quick, man, I'm going to tell you right now, it is mind-boggling to me, and it hits home now because I ended a 22-year career in media, and as I know, people, and we see it all because, especially in this age with the digital age, we can see everything. But my grandmother, I look at her; she is 97, and she built a black newspaper in Ohio, and she can tell me about things like Selma and all these different stories, being there herself, and how it's culminated in 2015. She's shaking her head at stuff like this, and she says to me, I can't believe it's still going on to this day. I look at all these situations that are going on around the country, and it's not just with black, it's with children, as you said, and all these different situations. And I can't understand to no end how anybody would sit there in their right mind and sit idly by and say, you know what, gun violence is not a concern. We can't get behind the president, fine. You have political concerns as far as backing him. There's plenty of agencies out there who are going against gun violence. Mm-hmm. Why don't you get involved with these agencies? They need your help. We can't just sound off when this stuff happens and idly waste our time by not doing anything else behind it. I need everybody out there to seriously consider, and I'm a stay-at-home dad, and I look at my son and I fear for him with all these situations against blacks in general, but around the world with children and everything. And I can't understand why people right now can't be just a little bit more sensitive and stop being political and get involved.
Oh, well, we all know that we need to stop being political, and I appreciate the call, Ed. Thank you so much for your thoughts. You're absolutely right. This is not something to be politicized. This is something where, as a nation, we need to come together, exercise our common sense, and decide definitively what's best. We can't think about, whether it's the NRA or somebody else, or lobbyists supporting them and, pushing their cause, whether or not it's the right or wrong way based on stuff like that. Just look at the facts and decide collectively as a nation of people with the common agenda of keeping our nation safe. What's in our best interest? That's what we need to do.